Hey everyone, welcome to our webinar on Autodesk Vault copy design, particularly tips and tricks on copy design. Let's just give a couple more minutes for others to join us and we will start very shortly. Thanks for your patience. All right, let's get started. Once again, thanks everyone for joining us today in our webinar on Autodesk Vault copy design. We're going to be looking at tips and tricks to better use copy design. Now, my name is Carlos Lastrilla. I'm the National Technical Manager for Cadgroup. And without much ado, let's get started. On today's webinar, we're going to be looking at 4 areas. First, let's look very briefly at what copy design actually is. What can it do for you? What are its advantages? We'll then also look at methods to access copy design. Well, strictly speaking, there's really just 2 methods to access copy design. One of them, if you've used copy design before, one of them you might have been using for quite some time now. The other is actually quite a new method for using copy design that's probably come out only in the 2022 or even 2023 release of the software. We'll have a look at the interface of copy design, and then we'll have a look at some tips and tricks and some workflows in Vault copy design. Now, what is copy design? So copy design effectively allows you to create a brand new design or new files, new design objects by copying existing data within a vault. Now, I've seen some organizations, and in fact, my own first experience with Vault was that I really implemented Vault in our organization back when I was a design manager, strictly for the purpose of using copy design. It is really that powerful. It prevents a whole bunch of these issues when you're doing a save copy as and stuff like that inside Inventor or AutoCAD. It manages a whole bunch of stuff that's really, really effective. And as the years have grown, copy design has actually become more powerful because of the new features and enhancements that Autodesk have put into it. So at the very basic level, copy design is simply copying an existing design, an existing drawing, existing assembly, existing part, and creating a brand new design out of that one from a file perspective. So depending on what design application you're using, whether it's AutoCAD, whether it's Inventor, copying the design usually is not just the drawing or the assembly, but it also involves copying everything, drawing, assembly parts, including the structure, the files or folder structure that you're using, so that when you copy it to a brand new project or to reuse that, you're applying a consistent method of copying files from one area to the other. Now, I mentioned design applications. More often than not, it's AutoCAD and Inventor. In fact, Inventor is really, I can hardly use or copy designs in Inventor without copy design. I know some might have been using Design Assistant for something like this. Design Assistant is a utility that comes with Autodesk Inventor. But if you've used Design Assistant before for copying designs, you're probably looking for a better solution because it was really painful using Design Assistant. So copy design is really, really powerful. You can AutoCAD is you can also use copy design for AutoCAD files and all its extras. If you're using AutoCAD Electrical, it's a really good way to copy AutoCAD Electrical project as well. Now, provided you need to have the project properly set up, the AutoCAD Electrical project properly set up in AutoCAD Electrical and in Vault for it to work. But once it does, it's a really good way to copy AutoCAD Electrical projects. All right. So how do you actually access copy design? Now, there's two main methods to access copy design. In fact, I'm just going to go ahead and go straight, stop using PowerPoint and go straight to my Inventor or my Vault interface. Right. So I've got my folder structure here in Vault. Let me just minimize or show a few buttons here because just want to make sure. Yep, I'm hoping everybody can see that. So I've got, for example, here my folder structure inside here, and I've got a specific folder structure for this webinar, and I have several different folder types here. So I've got this green folder, and this green folder is effectively my source that I want to copy, and then I'm going to be copying to these what is orange folders, which is my new project or my new designs. Now, within Autodesk Vault Copy Design, for example, I can access that by clicking any component from an assembly or from a drawing. I can do access copy design from that method. Personally, I prefer copying from an assembly itself, and I'll explain why in a bit. But to copy an assembly, you simply right-click on that assembly, and you go copy design over here. Okay. Now, when I do that, that then will open up the copy design interface of Vault. Right? And that's the copy design interface that we see here. Now, I'm going to close this for now because I just want to show you the other way or the less common way of accessing Vault copy design. Now, that way is actually using Inventor itself or from the Inventor interface itself. So inside the Inventor interface, you obviously we have our model tab here, which is where we do most of our modeling. And if you're using Vault, you will also have the Vault tab here. Now, if you don't have the Vault tab there, for example, let's disappear there, you have to click on this plus icon and then go Vault to get the Vault tab to appear. Now, this particular assembly, I can access copy design simply by right-clicking here and going copy design, which will lead me to that same exact window that I had earlier from Vault, and it'll show me this one here. And in fact, I deliberately chose a different coloring scheme in my Inventor. It's not the dark theme yet, just so that I can show that this is actually doing copy design from within Inventor. Right now, by the way, please feel free at any point in time to raise a question, whether in the chat interface or the questions interface of GoToWebinar, or later on, I'll also have some time for some question and answer sessions. Okay, so that's one way to access copy design. Again, right-click on that assembly or the particular sub-assembly. It doesn't have to be the top level. It can also be any level below that. You know what? It can actually even be a part itself. You can do a copy design on a single part itself, right? But that's one way to access, or the other way to access copy design. Now, another neat feature, it's kind of a hidden gem, I would say, in Inventor, is that when you're inside Inventor, you can actually start using some of these other Vault commands. And the way to do that is if you go over here, if you look at the Vault tab, way over here in the ribbon, and then if you go to show details, right? That show details actually is, if I'm not mistaken, this came out in Inventor 21 or Inventor 22, where I now have the details panel of my particular component. So for example, that assembly there, I can do the show details for that assembly, and I can see the history, I can see the uses, expand the uses, expand that, for example. I can see the where used, where this particular assembly is used, whether it's affected by any change orders or any change orders that have been applied against it in the past or currently. And I can also have a bill of materials. Now this will only be shown if I've got my bill of materials structure tab in Inventor turned on. So that's not turned on right now for this assembly. So I don't see any bill of materials information. But anyway, this is exactly like what you would see inside Vault in the details panel. And you can add more columns here as well if you wanted to. If you wanted to, for example, customize view and you do fields, and then let's say all version fields, let's say because I'm using a non-significant or semi-significant naming scheme, I'm going to apply a description field so I know exactly what I'm looking at. I actually haven't tried the thumbnail field here. Let's actually try. That's an interesting one. Thumbnail. I think it should be okay. Let's move it up. Yeah. So I can see the thumbnail field there again. So within that interface itself, I actually have the ability to go to from within Inventor. If I say, let's look at this particular, let's say this, this blower housing here. If I go to, and I can go to folder, that'll actually bring me to Inventor straight, Vault straight to that particular file inside Vault, in the Vault interface. Again, this show details panel is a really wonderful addition inside our Inventor interface that allows us to do a lot of the stuff that we do inside the Vault client, but just within Inventor itself. So again, it's under here, under the show details panel or command, and then this will show here. Now, obviously, you can dock this as you want. Dock this to the left, dock this below, okay? Or you can actually just put this in another screen if you so desire. Okay, enough of that. Now let's go back to Vault. Let's do a copy design. So a very common scenario that we see set up, for example, for some organizations, or a lot of organizations, not just some, is that they've already have this standard design. They've developed this design over time, and then when they have a new project or a new customer come in and they want to use that design for this customer or this new project, but maybe not the entirety of the design. Maybe let's say 80% of those components are going to be the same for this new design, but 20% of them I'm still going to need to make some tweaks to suit this particular project or suit this particular customer. So in that scenario, they've already defined a template kind of project, right? So it's got all of the projects there, all of the files for that project there, and it's got the description, it's got the part number. It's a fully functional project. So in fact, if you just need to issue drawings for this type of design, you can issue drawings straight from this design straight away, right? Now, this particular folder structure or file and folder structure that I'm showing you actually has some semi-significant naming schemes. What does that mean? That means that the numbering scheme here, the file naming scheme, and consequently the part numbering scheme, is not only automatically generated sequential numbers at the end, but it also has some significant names. So for example, PRJ for this kind of naming scheme means it's a project file, which means that more often than not, this particular file gets edited for a specific customer or for a specific project. MSTR means it's a master file, which means that this is a template file. And then if I go on, for example, to some of the components in this particular folder, the way this particular structure works is that any component is a standard component, which means more often than not, and I'd say 99% of the time, this component does not change. This is standard across the bar for all different projects, right? So then it has that STD prefix to it, -1001. That's an internal company project code for all standard components within the company. And then it's got an automatically generated sequence number, right? So this is the way this folder structure is arranged. And you will see that inside that folder structure, you're going to see a whole bunch of PRJ files, which means that, again, a PRJ file is editable within the context of a project. When you copy this to a new project, more often than not, you're going to be making changes to that file. SCD file means it's a standard file, and chances are you're not going to be making any copies to that file anyway. Okay, so let's have a look at a scenario where we're doing a copy design of this. Now, before I do that, I'm going to see if there are any questions on the poll window or the question window. Nothing yet. All good. Okay, let's proceed. Right. So I mentioned earlier, I prefer doing a copy design at the assembly level. If I do that, I right click and go copy design. This now gives me the copy design interface. Now, the copy design interface is a modeless interface. What does that mean? Now, what this means is that I can actually have that off to one side and still manipulate my Vault here. It's almost like, almost not purely, but almost like it's a separate application to the Vault Professional client itself, right? Now, I have obviously my menu bar, my toolbars, and I have here my file list, right? Now, this file area, this is actually divided or can be seen in 3 different ways. The way we're seeing it now is called a file list. It's a flat list of all of the files that are included in that assembly that we selected for copy design. So again, it's a flat list of all the files in that assembly that uses this particular copy design, or that we chose for a copy design. Another way to look at this file list is the tree view. Now, the tree view is very similar to how it's structured from an Inventor or from an AutoCAD perspective. It shows us the parent-child relationships of a particular assembly or component that we're doing a copy design for. Now, as you'll see here, all of the files are there. It's arranged. I've got top-level assembly, I've got subcomponents, and I've got, for example, here, standard component. You'll notice now there are some subfolders inside here, okay? Or actually, it should go here. So documentation. So what this does is that although it's not explicitly listed here in the tree view, if I expand, this shows me all of the documentation related to this particular file here. So if there are any drawing files, right, or drawing representations related to this component, I will see it here. That's the same case here because I can see under this particular part, I've got my documentation, and I expand that, I've got that file there. Now, one of the things that I find really useful, especially in cases like this where, hey, I don't actually remember what STD-1001-0000 is, right? So I can actually add custom columns to this particular view. And to do that, I just right-click on any column header. Doesn't have to be any specific one, just any column header. Right-click and go choose columns. Now, this will then bring up this choose column dialog box, and I can say, actually, I want to have a look at the description. Drop that down there. Okay, and just as heads up, I also like seeing, where's this? The original, yep, so that's a destination name. Where is the originator? It's in the other view, sorry, the original file name. Close that. Okay, I haven't copied anything yet. That's why it's not showing me the origin file name. But anyway, so I now have the descriptions here. So now I've got a better context of what I'm actually going to do in terms of copying, right? So that's the first two. The last one is the show folder view. And this basically shows me how this particular design is arranged on a per folder basis, as if I'm looking at it through the Vault client itself. So very similar to what I see here inside the Vault client, right? So I haven't actually executed any copy design commands yet. I've actually, I have executed the copy design command yet, but I haven't specifically configured the copy design command to do my copying. So I'm just showing you or doing a walk around of the copy design interface. Now on the right side here, I've got several panels that I can see here. The first panel is, for example, the where used panel. And the where used panel here, what this allows me to do is that if I click on a particular component, it shows me where that component is used. Now, obviously, a drawing is not used anywhere. If I look at, for example, component, look at a standard component. Let me, oh, why is that not refreshing? Okay, that's really strange. This usually will refresh really quickly. It's not refreshing. Let me just go back to another view, preview. There we go. Look at that standard component. Then it shows me where that component is actually being used. And I can do this right now for the source. Later on, when I have executed the copy design command, I will also now be able to see the destination, right? So right now, the destination and source are exactly the same. Now, the next command is actually, the next panel in this area is actually really useful, and it's a numbering panel. This allows me, when I copy my design, this then allows me to choose a specific numbering scheme that I want to apply for my design. So what's my new file name when I copy the design? And we'll see an example of that later. The next one is, again, the actions panel, which tells me in a summarized view, what files am I copying, what files am I reusing, what files am I replacing, excluding, removing, and what files have to be edited. And last one here is the folders panel, and this is actually very similar to what we see here in the layout view and the folder view here. All right. Now, to be honest, most of the time I don't really have a look at the where used. I usually split between numbering and the actions. Those are my two main areas. And in fact, I'd say 90% of the time I'm in this numbering area here. Okay, so let's have a look at how we actually do a particular copy design. So in this particular case, I want to copy the blower skid assembly because I want to create a new iteration or a new design based off this blower skid assembly. So what I can do there is I can right click on this now, and I have several options when I'm right clicking on a top level file. I've got the copy branch, right? Copy branch 2, copy and copy 2. Okay, so let me define it. So copy branch means it's going to look at everything from that top level down, so the entire branch and all its twigs and all its leaves. It's going to copy that straight. When it says copy branch, it means that it's copying it to the same location where that particular assembly is. Copy branch 2 allows me to copy the branch to an entirely new folder location. So in this particular case, it's going to copy this entire folder structure or file structure to a different location inside Vault. The same thing with reuse branch. Instead of copying, it's going to be reusing those files inside that branch. Copy is just for that specific file that I've right-clicked, right? That's the same case for copy to. It's actually going to copy to a specific folder, but just for that specific file that I've right-clicked. Replace allows me to replace the file with another, the destination file with another file from inside Vault as well. Exclude removes it from the equation of being copied at all. Reuse means that it's just going to reuse this particular component. So for this particular example, I'm going to go copy branch 2, right? And now it's going to ask me to nominate where do you want me to copy this branch. So let's say I'm going to just do it under this folder here, and I'm going to call this PRJ-1024. All right. And what it will do now when I select that and I click OK is that now it's going to note, okay, these are all the files now. It's going to have a destination path, as you see here. That's the destination, copy design, tips and tricks, PRJ-1024. And it's going to have an action here called copy. That means obviously it's going to get copied over. Now, what you'll notice is that the drawings are automatically have an action of auto. And what that means, that's automatically going to get copied as well to the new destination folder. And in fact, if I look at, for example, my folder view here, I'm going to see under demonstration, under copy design tips and tricks, I'm going to see a brand new PRJ-1024 blower type 1 template, and I'm going to see the same folder structure that I'm seeing in my blower type 1 template. Okay, now these are one of the things that annoys me a bit about copy design, in that why did it copy blower type 1 template, right? I actually wanted all of this to be straight under PRJ 1024, but nonetheless, there's a way that we can get around this. But the first thing I wanted to obviously indicate was the fact that, okay, I've got a whole bunch of files. Right now, the destination name, you'll see it's got a prefix of copy of, right? PRJ master 0000. And in fact, if I look at my numbering scheme here, my numbering panel here, I can see that the prefix is actually set that way. Now, I can actually change this prefix of this one, and let's say CG dash, and it's actually going to change that to CG dash, right? Just for that particular one. But if I look at my components, it's still going to be copy of. If I select if I select over here and select everything, I can right click, go set values, go prefix, and go CG dash, right? And everything now is going to get named CG dash, right? But that's not what I want to do, because I've already defined a specific numbering scheme for my organization. And I'm going to say, okay, I want all of these, for example, okay, to be in this numbering scheme type 2. So again, by selecting everything, I right click, change scheme, and go PG numbering scheme type 2, and click on that. Now everything disappears here, because this panel only shows me all the files that don't have a numbering scheme. And because I've assigned all of the files to a specific numbering scheme, I can go here and go CG numbering scheme. And now I see all of the files here inside my numbering scheme. Now, you might ask, okay, there's a specific scenario here. All of these now have got a project code, right? All of these, but I've got some standard components here. And really, do I want to be copying these standard components, or should I be reusing them? So there might be a scenario, in fact, most of the scenarios, you might want to just go ahead and reuse this particular standard component. So the way we can do that easily is if we go, for example, to layout and go list view again, it lists all the files. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to sort this simply by clicking on the file name, and it sorts everything by file name. And why I like doing that is because now I can choose all of these STD parts. I can right click on them and I can say reuse, right? I'm not going to copy it. I'm going to be reusing them from the original template project. You'll notice that even the actual drawing has automatically been reused as well, because by default, whatever happens inside Vault to the dependent file, the drawing file will follow suit. And in fact, the actual drawing file will get the same name as the component, the base component that's been assigned to it, right? It'll get if the assembly file is called PRJ MSTR 0006.iam, the associated drawing will copy that same file name. Now there's an option inside copy design. If I go to options and I go link drawing with model, if I untick that, so this is sort of just to be clear on this is actually linking the drawing file name to the model. So even if I have this ticked or unticked, it will still copy the drawing and link it to the model. This just refers to the file name itself. Okay, it copies the file name of the model and uses that for the drawing. So I have that ticked, and that's why these two have the same, effectively the same number. But anyway, as we've seen here, I've said I'm going to start reusing all of these because I'm not really interested in copying them. They're standard parts. And in fact, if I go back to my folder view, I'm going to see that copy design tips and tricks, blower type template 1, everything inside here have got that PRJ number now, right? Everything here under components, the standard components are still going to be used from that location. So again, it's a particular scenario you want to be sure you're applying your company standards and company rules to, because some companies, even though it's a standard component, they still want it to be copied over to the new project, whereas other organizations, they want it to be referred to from that original template file. And in fact, I've got another folder structure that shows a bit of a better practice on how to do this. But anyway, at this point, I've said, okay, PRJ 1024, in fact, wait, it's not 1024. It's using a predefined default of XXXX to define a project name. Now, in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to now select all of these, right? Right click, set values, set project code. The project code is those middle XXXX there. So I'm going to say my project code is 1024. I'm going to click OK. And then once that's 1024, you'll see that all of the files now have that 1024 prefix on them. Okay. So effectively now I've copied all of the 1024 prefixes. I'm now ready to do a full-blown copy design of this. Now, another particular feature of copy design is once you've copied those files over to its new destination, you can actually apply some rules as the file is getting copied. Now, what are these rules? So to have a quick look at those rules, for example, I go into options and I say action rules, and I'm going to go to define. I've got a whole bunch of rules here. Now, depending on certain situations, I can go new project copy. By the way, this area here is only accessible by administrators. And the reason for that is as an admin, you can force everyone to use a default action rule and not show all of the action rules. But anyway, so I've got new project. Let me show you what that rule is. So what that rule is, whenever I'm copying a design for a brand new project, I want to reset the drawing info, which means that apply a rule that when I do a copy design, look for any drawings, file extension contains DWG, and then the company property, set it to blank because I'm copying it for a new project. So it's maybe a brand new company. The part number gets copied from the file name, which is what we usually have. And then the project, again, is set to blank. So although I've got a template project, or although I've got an existing project for an existing customer, I might want to copy this for a brand new customer and just reset the company name or the customer name and the project name for that. Same case with component info is that if it's an IPT file, an IAM file, or an IPN file, I can have a look and say that, okay, let's do company set blank, project set blank, part number set blank. And then I can go, stock number is mapped to the original file name. So I can then see where this file was actually copied from, right? That's just an optional way, a specific way to configure this. But these are, for example, the rules that are going to be applied when I hit this button here. And this is called the execute copy command. So let me click on that now. In fact, let me just double check. It's a good habit to double check across all views. So under the tree view, I've got everything I need here. I know what's getting copied. All the standard parts are not in bold. In effect, I can right click in here and expand all. Shows me everything that's standard. Okay, that's good. Another way I can do this is look at my list view, sort it by action, all the standard parts. There's no action against it. All the PRJ parts, there is an action against it. That's great. So I'm happy with that. I click now execute copy, and this will now do the copy design for me. Now let me check if there are any questions. Nope, not at this point. Right. Okay. That's all copied. There's a tick mark against them. That's all good. I'll close copy design now. And if I refresh this one here, I've got a brand new project 1024 there. I've got, oh, that's what I forgot to do. I forgot to do a copy and replace of the path. But in this particular scenario, luckily we can just drag and drop everything from Vault. But I did forget to remove this particular path here. In this case, to fix this particular project, anyway, before we fix that, let's see that the project has actually been left blank. As we see here, the company has been left blank, whereas in the original file, we had a company and we had a project, right? That just shows us that the copy design rules have taken into effect. And this one here, the stock number, we use that as a container or a placeholder for where we would put the original file name. But anyway, what I wanted to do here was just actually move, drag and drop it here. And these two folders here, oops, it's prompting me. Do I want to move? Yes. Same for blower. Same for components. And now I can actually delete this folder here. So now I've got this brand new project folder. I've got this brand new assembly inside Vault, or drawing inside Vault, and brand new assembly inside Vault. And I can just right click on that and I can open that, and that'll open up inside AutoCAD. So inside Inventor. So now this is my brand new project. And I've got all my files here inside Vault. Let's wait for it a bit. Is it still thinking? Now, what it's doing, it's obviously downloading all of these files in the background. Nope. There must be a hidden dialog that I'm actually not seeing. Let me close this one. Nope. Bear with me a second. Oop. It seems my Inventor is frozen. Let me just cascade my windows. No, everything's there. Something's caused my Inventor to freeze. And oh, there it is. Oh, where's the path? It's actually gone close. Anyway, so that's my new project. Now I've got another kind of template project here, and this is slightly different in the way this has been arranged. So in this particular example, that's a template project, but it's actually referring to some standard components in an outside folder. So in this particular method, the way the parts are distinguished between a standard part and a project-specific part is by folder structure. So let me do a copy design on this one. Right, and then I'm going to go into preview. Similar scenario as before. I want to copy this, copy design, or sorry, copy branch 2. Now you might wonder, what's the difference between copy branch 2 and copy 2, right? Like I mentioned earlier, when you do a copy 2, it'll actually copy just that part that I've selected. Now another nuance that will happen to the copy branch 2 is because inside copy design, if I copy, right, if I copy a particular subcomponent, right, this one here, if I copy this one too, or copy 2, it will actually, let me create a new folder here. Let's call this PRJ 1039. Oops, not there. Over here. PRJ 1030. By the way, those folders that have an asterisk or star beside it means they are not yet created inside Vault. They are simply placeholders at this point. Okay, let's click OK. So what you'll notice is if I do a copy 2 of a child, it'll automatically copy the parent associated to that child. And that's because under actions, I have this automatically copy parents turned on. If this is turned off, it will not copy the parent, but you will need to make sure that you're actually copying the parent as well manually. Otherwise, you're going to see a red highlight across that row there. In fact, if you persist in doing that, what it'll actually do is it will keep the same assembly, but make that assembly refer to this copied version. So there might be some use cases for that, but overall or in general, you would want to make sure that that automatically copy parents is selected. So I'm just going to clear this, clear root node. Let me start again. Copy this, copy design. Right click. Now, another thing that copy branch 2 does is that any folder structures that you've got, it's like what we have here. We've got a folder structure for blower, folder structure for components. Any folder structure that you've got, it will actually replicate that using the copy branch 2. Okay. So really handy tip. So I'm going to say new folder from there, PRJ 1041. Click OK. Now, this is where that other method of looking at the folder view comes in very handy, because now I can see, okay, that's PRJ 1041. I've got some standard components in there, but actually I don't want to have those standard components copied because they're standard. I'm going to be reusing them. So you'll notice how under standard components, although those folders have been temporarily been placed, they're actually not. They're actually grabbing everything from standard components, right? Which means that if I now go back to my tree view, all of my standard components are just being reused from its original location. If I go onto my list view, we'll see the same effect. And if I go on to my folder view, that's the same effect as well. Now, before I forget, this is the part where I actually don't want this blower type 2 template to appear. So I'm going to go back to my tree view, to my list view, and where it says there, let me minimize this, put that over there, make it really small. You'll see that under my folder structure, I've got that template thing, right? What I'm going to do is I'm going to right click, I'm going to go find and replace. And this is another really powerful feature of copy design. Now I'm going to look for / blower _ blower type 2 - template and /, and I just want to replace that with a blank, or sorry, with a /. Okay, look what happens if I click replace all. From here, it's creating all of these blower type 2 template, blower frame. If I replace all, bang, I no longer have that particular subfolder, which the template subfolder, except for this one here. And this one here, I'm actually just happy to remove that manually. That's the only one. So now if I go on to my tree view, or sorry, to my folder view, under demonstration, copy design tips and tricks, you'll notice now everything is under that master PRJ 10, the PRJ 1041 folder. So again, I'm happy with my folder structure. Let me now change my naming scheme to numbering scheme. And I'm going to change everything again, change the project code to 1041. Okay. I execute now my copy, just making sure I captured everything. Yep, everything's copied. Execute the copy. And again, that's copying the design for me inside Vault. One thing you may have noticed as well is that although initially here when I copied here, by the way, while it's doing that copy design, it's no longer modeless. I cannot select anymore anything in my Vault until that's completed. When it's completed, I can go back here. Yep, it's back to me. You'll notice that everything's been in a released state because it's a template project. Anything I copy or create anew goes back to a work in progress state. Now, if you look at this particular copied design, what happens is, because we reused a lot of the standard components, these standard components, for example, the blower base, is actually used in project 0924 and project 1041, which we've just created earlier. All right, so those are, I would say, one of the best examples or a good example of the use of copy design tips and tricks. Again, I would suggest either you separate the standard components and project-specific components either via a file name or by folder structure. It's up to you how you want to do that. One thing that you may have noticed here is that these components actually have this one here. This is actually a content center part. One thing that I did not highlight earlier was that content center parts by default, by virtue of being in a library type folder in Vault, they are always always reused, not always copied, always reused. So let me just give you an example here. So if I right click on this one and go copy design again, okay, I'm gonna go, let's say preview, and I'm gonna go, you notice there's no content center components. I'm gonna expand all. There's no content center components there, right? Because by default, any library components are automatically hidden from the view. Now, if you want to show that, you want to click on library files here. So it now will actually show you these library files as well. If I right click and copy branch 2, and let's say I'm going to copy that to PRJ 1047, you'll notice that it's going to try and copy that now. Okay, it's going to copy that content center component, but it's going to copy it not to the content center file location, but it's going to copy it to a subfolder. In fact, let's have a look in the folder view. It's going to copy it to a subfolder inside that for content center files. Again, up to you what you want to do with this. There might be some situations where if it's a standard component and then you want to make it a custom component, you could do that. For example, this one here, I could make that project specific as well and put that in another folder using the find and replace, right? So that's one of the nuances of show children and then showing library files here. Attachments like PDFs that are automatically generated, you can show that as well. But by default, these are actually just turned off, which is actually, I think, a good idea to have it turned off. All right, I think I'll leave it there. Let me see if there are any questions. No? Are there any questions? Feel free to raise your hand on the chat window or unmute yourself. I'll allow everyone to get unmuted. Yep. All right, doesn't seem to be any questions. I hope I was clear enough in my demonstration of some tips and tricks in copy design. And if that's the case, thank you very much for attending today's webinar on Vault copy design tips and tricks. We've run 12 minutes short, so that's great. Free you up to do all this stuff. I'll let you go. And once again, thank you very much. Have a great day ahead. Bye.